Are you a heaper or a sweeper? We've mentioned sweep bags lots of times on the podcast before, but heaping is a new one we'd like to introduce you to. Is heaping better or worse than sweeping? Let's find out.
You're listening to the Declutter Hub podcast, bringing you tried and tested, no-nonsense tips and advice from the leading experts in decluttering and organising your home. Now here are your hosts, Ingrid Jansen and Leslie Spellman.
This podcast episode is sponsored by the Clean and Tidy Home Show. The Clean and Tidy Home Show takes place at Excel London on the 8th and 9th of October 2022, and everyone is welcome. Visit to get all the tips, tricks, tools and motivation you need to clean, organise and take control of your home. Go to cleanandtidyhomeshow.com for more information and to buy tickets. We'll be there and we hope you will too.
Hello and welcome listeners, I'm Ingrid.
And I'm Leslie.
If you're new to the Declutter Hub podcast, you are so welcome here. What you'll find is reality, empathy and advice by the bucket load, and sometimes Leslie making fun of me, but that's okay. I'm getting used to it on this podcast. So if you're thinking to yourself, what's going on? I'm getting told off by Leslie every once in a while.
Yes. Quite often, to be fair, quite often these days. We want to remind everyone while we're here that you can see all the fun and frivolity on YouTube if you want to, so you can see what it looks like behind the scenes. Now, more and more of our listeners are heading over to YouTube to watch as well as listen and really enjoying that as well. So you just pop over to declutterhub.com / whatever the number of the podcast is, and this one is 205. So declutterhub.com / 205, and you will be able to see the link to our YouTube channel on there and watch the podcast there and then.
Yes, and you can also find useful resources, links to other podcasts you might find interesting. If we have a guest, we put all their details there. We put a little show summary in. So lots of information to find out on the show notes. And you can leave us a comment there too. So if you think it yourself after listening, I have learned something new, or I need to share this story with Leslie and Ingrid, go to the comments and let us know. We would love to know what you're up to, and if you've learned something, or you maybe have had a light bulb moment, please tell us.
Yeah, when we get all our emails in every day, because when you leave comments, we get them into our emails. It's just quite nice, isn't it? Because it can be quite solitary, apart from being the two of us, to be fair, doing a podcast. But it's nice to get some feedback back from you guys, whether that's a comment, whether that's a review, whatever that is. It's always lovely to see. So without further ado, Ingrid, what is today's podcast all about? Explain all.
Well, today, Leslie, we are talking about heaping or sweeping. And this kind of all came about because we talk about sweeping and sweep bags a lot. And then one of our members came to our one of our live sessions and she said, I don't think I'm actually a sweeper. I'm more of a heaper. And it just gave us the giggles, and we thought, we need to do a podcast about this and explain what a sweeper or a heaper is and what's the difference, and what are the pros and cons about heaping or sweeping? Are there any pros, Leslie? I mean, let's delve into that. But
I think people have never been more excited to find out what a heaper is, Ingrid. that's my hunch. So anyway, before we talk about heaping, let's talk about sweeping, because we've talked about that many, many times. This is like the most bizarre podcast ever, isn't it? Heaping and sweeping. It's kind of making me laugh already. Whether we're actually going to get to the end of it and give some gems remains to be seen. Right, Ingrid, you explain. Let's get serious and talk about what is sweeping.
Well, Leslie, sweeping is, I think it's a made-up word that we've made up, but there's a reason for it, because we see sweep bags all the time at our clients' houses, and running the Declutter Hub membership, our members have told us about their sweep bags too. So basically, what is a sweep? A sweep is an action of running around your house with a plastic bag, a laundry basket, a bag for life, an empty IKEA bag, a box of some sort, and you run around and you think, oh, I've got company coming over, somebody's coming to my house looks really messy, let me do a quick kind of tidy up and just throw everything in a box, but you're not tidying up, because tidying up is actually putting stuff back into the right place. But this stuff is out randomly. You don't know yet where the right place is, because you might not have been with the Declutter Hub for a long time, or you might not be in our membership, so you don't have the right place. So you just think, I'm just going to grab a bag, throw everything in, and then I'll look at it another time. And this is how sweep bags are created, by doing sweeping around your home. And it can be one bag or 2 or 3 bags when company comes over, or it can be something that gets done on a regular basis because you're feeling really overwhelmed. You don't know what to do. You don't know where to start. You think, oh, okay, let me just shovel some stuff in the bag quickly, clear the dining room table so we can have dinner, or I need to do some crafting. I need to have a flat space ready. There's all this stuff here. I don't know what to do with it, where it goes. Just kind of go over with your arm over the table, whoop, all in a bag or in a box, and there you go. You get a room full of stuff.
Now we've talked about sweeping, and now we've included shoveling. So it's like we've got sweeping brushes, we've got shovels coming into play. There's a lot going on here. Now we're doing whooshing into a bag. So you get the very nicely explained, Ingrid. And the types of things that typically end up in sweep bags are bits of paperwork, kind of coins, old candles, often we get things like passports that are there, they get thrown into a sweep bag. And this is where sweep bags get super dangerous, because we're just gathering loads and loads of stuff. We're doing it very quickly, without much thinking, without any kind of analysis of what it is, putting it all into a bag. There's bits of food, things that you bought from the shops, receipts, things that need to be returned. They all end up in that sweep bag. And sometimes they don't come out, and that's when things get lost. So those are the types of things that end up in a sweep bag. Now, I think it's fair to say, Ingrid, that there is an upside to doing a sweep. You're going to feel a little bit more in control. If someone suddenly was dropping by unexpected, you're going to feel like you're sort of showing your house off in a better order. So you're going to feel better about it. That's the upside. You have cleared down some surfaces, but it's very, very temporary and can be quite damaging is the wrong word, but detrimental, I guess, to your decluttering journey.
Yes, I think it's a super quick fix, isn't it? It's a quick fix that you think, okay, let me just quickly tidy up, move some stuff to the side. But deep down, I think people know they're just moving the problem. And when you do this once or twice with a sweep bag, no harm done. You get them out later, you tidy it all up. But when this is something that you do on a very, very regular basis, and there's a room somewhere in your house with not 1, not 2, but maybe 20 or 40 of these bags, then you are going to really get into a bit of trouble, because you're going to definitely lose items. So there's a lot of downsides to doing a sweep, isn't there?
There is. And we see it all too often, and that's when things absolutely get lost, isn't it? So in these sweep bags, all those things that you've not found, they will undoubtedly be in a sweep bag. But if you've got multiple sweep bags, then you find it very difficult to go through them and find what you need. So whilst there is a very, very temporary quick fix, as Ingrid says, in the long run, you're better off not doing this and investing little chunks of time to getting stuff sorted. So we talked about sweeping, Ingrid. What is heaping? Because that is new terminology for us.
Well, it caught me by surprise, and I actually knew exactly what our member meant with heaping. I had just never, I think because it rolls off the tongue so nicely, heaping or sweeping. I think that's why it kind of stuck with us, because we like that kind of alliteration, don't we, Leslie? Yeah. But I think when she said it, I was like, yes, people do heap things up. When you see kind of piles of stuff around people's houses. and they kind of look like relatively neat piles. They're quite similar items, but you do kind of wonder, what is this stuff doing there? Why is there a heap of stuff next to the sofa, the bed, on the kitchen counter, on the floor somewhere, stacked precariously on a little table in the hallway? It's like, why is there all this sort of, normally not very random, I mean, it can be, but there's sometimes some order. And that's, I think, what makes heaping different from sweeping.
Yeah, and so it's an interesting one, isn't it? And so I think it gives the illusion of being more orderly by heaping stuff together. So say, for example, if it was a pile of paperwork, which is sort of typical, and this paperwork had been gathered, it was sort of all around the house. You know, there was a bit on the kitchen work surface, a little bit in the hallway, a little bit on the floor, a little bit next to your bedside cabinet, some that's come out of your handbag or your work bag. And so I think what people typically do is gather all of those pieces of paper together and put them in a nice, neat little pile. And it feels so much better than having them in random places. So heaping is definitely a thing that happens with paperwork. I think that another example of heaping is clothes as well. So you've not quite got round to doing the washing, the ironing, the putting away. And so you heap all these together. So you might have your laundry pile and you sort it into piles of blacks, whites and colours, but you don't quite get around to putting it in the washing machine, or everything's ready and it's not quite ready for the ironing, or you've done the ironing and it's still in a nice little pile, but it's not quite put away. So heaping is definitely evidence of procrastination, isn't it, for the most part, but it looks neater. So a pile of washing that is neatly folded and ready to put away looks better than a random heap full of stuff all over the kitchen, doesn't it?
Yes, and I think it's exactly what you say, Leslie. It creates the illusion of it being tidier. But the thing is, we know there's unfinished business, of all these little piles, that folding. Some people just absolutely dislike putting stuff away where they folded it, they've ironed it, and it just doesn't make it to the cupboards. And there's this pile of stuff that is clean, that's folded, that's ironed, and it doesn't make it back. Now, there's whole other reasons why it doesn't go back, but it's because the cupboards are probably too full and the stuff can't be put away. And that's what's the bigger issue behind all these piles of stuff everywhere. It can't go to the right place, but because it's quite the same kind of item, it looks neater. So it looks less chaotic, less messy, but it's still unfinished jobs that haven't been done.
So I definitely think that heaping is better than sweeping on balance. Neither of them are ideal. So we're going to pop back after the break and we're going to talk about how you can avoid both heaping and sweeping.
Are you worn down with clutter controlling your life? Have you tried to declutter hundreds of times but get stuck? Do you struggle to even know where to start because every room has clutter? Come and join our free 5-day challenge starting on Monday, the 5th of September, and learn how to reset your home with us. Go to declutterhub.com/RYH to find out more and sign up. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the second part of this podcast. And before the break, we were talking about heaping and sweeping. We talked about what sweeping is, the upsides and downsides, and we started talking about what heaping is. Now, Leslie, is there an upside of heaping?
Is there an upside of heaping? Yes, because you have done a little bit. You have done the gathering like with like, which is part of the organizational process, isn't it? And can be part of the decluttering process as well. It's very useful to see what you've got and to have it all gathered together. In fact, it's something that we would absolutely recommend when you're decluttering, is try to gather lots of similar things together so you can understand and you can see the volumes that you have before you get started. So yes, there is an upside to heaping for sure. But what we're interested in is, why are we not getting to the end? Because all of these things, heaping or sweeping, are both unfinished business, as you say. They're both, well, they're not really, heaping is not really a quick fix, but they're both doing part of the process, but not all of it.
Yes, I think exactly what you said, Leslie. You procrastinate about something. That's why it ends up in a pile. But what can we do then to prevent this from happening? I definitely agree. For me personally, heaping is better than sweeping. I mean, we've seen the sweep bags, haven't we? We've seen the sweep bag with like tons of different kinds of things. It's like, how do all of these different bits end up in a bag? It's like, it's amazing. But the problem is that a lot of times these items don't have homes, and you see the similar kind of items in the sweep bags. So if you then unpack 10, 20 sweep bags, you will see the same categories. There's toiletries, there's batteries, there's coins, there's paperwork, there's a random kitchen item. It's the same thing. So that's why I think it's so satisfying to do sweep bags, but that's by the by. But if you look at what's better, heaping or sweeping, I would definitely say heaping, because at least it's all together already.
Yeah,
but still not ideal.
No, it's so interesting, because what people talk about is which is the part of decluttering that doesn't get done, be part of the decluttering and organizing process. And actually, interestingly, starting and finishing are the two bits that people find the most difficult. So people are like, well, I don't really know where to start, so I just never get started. And actually what we find then towards the end, people do 85% of the project, but they don't get to that finished stage. They don't do that final push of taking stuff to the charity shop, of putting things away, of doing that final hoover round. And it's so, so important so that you can then look back, give yourself that pat on the back and say, I did that. And then it motivates you on, because if you only get 80% through, what you're looking at is what you've got left to do and not what you've already done. Whereas if you get to the end of the process, it's much more satisfying, isn't it? And you feel much more accomplished.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, a perfect example is indeed laundry. I mean, normally putting away laundry, once it's folded and ironed and done, it should only take a couple of minutes. But the problem is that the cupboards are too full, and that's that last little stage. But then what happens is this laundry starts to pile up. People start to pull stuff from the pile, so it gets less neat than it was before. So that neat pile that you created of stuff gets more messy. Then somebody dumps something on there that's maybe dirty and not clean and ironed and washed. And then you start to go into a vicious cycle of, oh my goodness, was that now clean? Was it dirty? Yeah. And then you might kind of grab it all up and go, okay, I'll wash that again. So you're giving yourself lots of extra work. While I think realizing where does the system break down? What is the part in the cycle of success that I struggle with? And indeed, it's that finishing phase. It is deciding whether it's a heap or a sweep bag. Where do these items live? So I know next time when I find an item that I can put it away. It doesn't have to be the place of all places forever and ever there to live, but you need to assign something. Just think, you know what? I don't know where batteries live. I've got an empty little tub here. I'm going to put it here, and this is where the empty batteries live until I find the place where they definitely go. But at least I know now where they are, and that makes all the difference.
I think it does. I've been thinking and reflecting whilst you've been chatting there, Ingrid, about what the purpose of this podcast is. And so ordinarily we try and give solutions. And the solution to not heaping and sweeping is a tough one, because it is almost, you need to do everything that we teach in terms of decluttering and organizing. So to get to that point where you've got enough space and you know you have got a designated space for everything and you feel comfortable putting it away and it's not difficult, you don't procrastinate, all of those things involve a lot of learning in the process to get to that point, don't they? So the purpose of this podcast was really to recognize these traits in yourself as being problematic. So it's not that we're going to give you a solution. Well, we could give you a solution, which is come into our membership and learn everything that we teach you, and then you won't heap and sweep again. Basically, that's the solution. But actually just recognizing that you do these things is really powerful as well. And that's where the light bulbs go on and go, yeah, I do that. I do that sweeping. And I realize how detrimental that is and how much that's setting me back. Yeah, I am that person who heaps things together and thinks that that's the job done at that point. I put all my paperwork together, but I don't get round to that point of putting it all away. Or I do my laundry and then it all gets in a jumble because someone comes and takes it all away when I've done all the hard work. That's the thing with heaping, is you've actually done a lot of the hard work at that point, but by not getting to that finished stage, it's detrimental.
You know what, Leslie, while you were talking, I was thinking, this reminds me also so much about the resets we talk about. And those are definitely light bulbs. You know what? The podcast with Marianne is a really good example. She's one of our members. We did a podcast with her a couple of podcasts ago, and she said, once I started to understand what you mean with resets, and I have to do them on a daily basis, and that a weekly reset is something different than a daily reset, and now I do that every day, and it resonated with her so much. And I think it's the same because she doesn't heap and sweep anymore now, but she builds up time in her schedule to, at the end of the day, 5 or 10 minutes, tidy up in her workshop where she does her flower arranging and where she makes all her bouquets and stuff. That prevents her from heaping and sweeping. Perfect example. She said, I would never have scissors because they were everywhere. And I kept buying them over and over and over again. And I think that's what happens if people lose stuff so much in sweep bags and in heaping piles that you end up losing so much time and losing so much money as well, because you have to buy an item over and over again because it's somewhere out there.
And also, Ingrid, in that first podcast we did with Tom Watson, he talked about boring time. Do you remember? And he's like, he designated 15 minutes a day of boring tasks that he didn't want to do. But he's like, it's boring time now. So I've got to go and do my resets, put things away, do all those things. So that was in his schedule to do boring time. And so we all have to find our way. We have to find our strategy that's going to work for us, don't we? Daily resets, boring time, whatever you want to call them, those things do need to be done in order for you to achieve and to get to that end point. Yeah. And that's what this podcast was all about. It's become apparent by the end of the podcast, Ingrid, why we actually did this podcast. So no, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because the solution is you've got a long way to go to get beyond that point, but just that recognition that that's one of your traits is very powerful.
Yeah. I think the realization that there can be a different way, and that heaping and sweeping is not the way to go, and that you can have a lot less stress and panic in your life all the time. And that's why we record this podcast to share with our listeners our knowledge. And yes, listeners, have you realized maybe now, are you a heaper or a sweeper? And have you come to the realization, I no longer want to be? I need to hang out with Leslie and Ingrid in their membership because I want to stop heaping and sweeping no more. Or maybe you're like, wow, I had never realized that I did this in the first place. And yes, I have sweep bags and I have loads of them and I want to tackle this. Or maybe you're like, wow, yeah, I am indeed a heaper. I'm not a sweeper at all. Tell us in the show notes. Go to declutterhub.com/205 and tell us in the comments. We would love to hear from you. We want to know, are you a heaper or a sweeper? Or have you maybe changed your ways by listening to our podcast?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some other things that we could have, because we could definitely go somewhere with this. We could have sleepers as well. And there'll definitely be some sleepers who are like, yeah, I'm just going to go for a little nap instead of doing anything. Then we've got people who might go deeper. What else have we got? A keeper. Come on, Ingrid.
Oh God, I'm not good at this kind of stuff. That's what you do, Leslie.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, we're definitely going to go beyond that. Definitely the sleeper and the keeper could be spoken about in a podcast. Maybe there's another podcast. Tell us what ends in "eper" that we could talk about that's related to decluttering, and we'll bring out another podcast for you. I think I'd like to be the sleeper one.
You want to do nap, Leslie?
I do. And on that note, it's like, I tell you what, shall I just go and have a nap for this afternoon instead?
No, you can't. We have work to do. We have, of course, we always have work to do. But never mind. Let's tell our listeners what we're doing next week, because next week you are talking to Penny from the Clean and Tidy Show, Leslie. What is that all about?
Yes, and so we are talking at the Clean and Tidy Show in October, which is at Excel in London. And it's really interesting how this came about. So I'm talking to Penny about why she decided to do a Clean and Tidy Show. So she's going to tell us all about the principle and the philosophy behind that show, which is going to be super cool and we're very excited to be a part of.
I know, I can't wait to be on stage and have a stand and hopefully talk to lots of people. I mean, I'm excited about it. So yes, that's going to be next week's podcast. So thanks everyone for listening, and we hope to see you at our next one.
Thanks so much for listening to the Declutter Hub podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us in your podcast player so you don't miss an episode, and we'll see you next week.